Hello, lovely podcast listeners. I always say this, I make myself laugh because yesterday I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, believed that it would be a 10-minute episode, and it was 38. I have nothing to say today. I have one singular point. We'll see how long it takes for me to make it. I hope you're well. This is amusing, which is why I always think it'll be quick, because it was just something as I was getting some sunlight in my eyes this morning went through my head. I thought, I'll just quickly say that. It was like a 1-minute thought. I thought, it'll be a great 4-minute podcast. And the point of it is probably the reason my mind went there was because someone said, a bit funny for any of you watching, I've got a scarf on. My neck was a bit cold. I hate cold neck. Someone said, thanks very much for this, that and the other. And you've sparked a bit of a discussion within my gym group about aggressive fat loss phases. And I loved that it was like you sparked a discussion, not necessarily that you sparked a gym-wide initiative to do an aggressive fat loss phase, because whether or not it comes across well enough to all of you, I don't want to promote it as the be-all and end-all. I don't want other people to implement it in a Joe Wicks fashion, I suppose, is a great way of putting it. A one-size-fits-all fashion. Interestingly, this is why my podcasts go on too long, is although lots of people are saying, can you do longer versions, longer ones? Probably longer with more information and less tangents, who knows? But my career, I always went down this very individualized performance nutrition type avenue, because I really disliked, as many of us do, these cookie cutter programs, one size fits all type things, very often done by very unqualified individuals, very often with the basis of demonization of some kind of macronutrient or food. So I really disliked that, and therefore I went so far the other way of you could only work with me if it was one-on-one coaching, very in-depth, very time-intensive, and therefore very costly to the individual. And then my side gig was putting out free content on social media and giving free advice wherever I could, privately and in person. Now, as time went on, I realized there was scope for group education. And when I say group education, I mean kind of formalized services and, programs where people could look to increase muscle or lose body fat or get their eating better. And very often when we talk about this stuff, it's the fat loss stuff, because there are challenges with fat loss that you just simply do not face with muscle gain, or even very often improving health. An insight for you, people who are diagnosed with celiac statistically are more likely to end up with disordered eating or some form of eating disorder. Now, you'd think, it's not demonization of food for a bad reason, or it's not a fallacy or a myth. They're cutting gluten for a specific reason. It doesn't matter. I talk about this, the perception of your restriction dictates its impact. So for some people, their perception is, this is good, I'm being empowered, this is going to make me more healthy, this is great. For other people, it's, I've had lots of foods I love taken away from me, and this has been imposed on me, and this is not my choice. And it sends them into they have a really, really restricted mindset. So, lots of good information already in this podcast, I think. if you take the time to muse over them, don't listen to it on 2 times speed. 1.5 at the very most. Those are the types of things people have been saying to me. So anyway, in this Joe Wicks effect of aggressive fat loss. Now, in his instance, it was demonize carbohydrate, get people exercising, put out recipes that no one could actually finish. So lots of people who are successful on his program, if you go into kind of the Joe Wicks success story Facebook groups and this, that, and the other, they'll say I couldn't eat all of the food on the plan. So I would have one particular person was like, I'd cook one of his recipes from whatever his book was or whatever, which were absurd. You know, it would literally said serves 1. The problem is, if you are someone who really struggles with fat loss, the type of person who we know genetically, maybe, the FTO gene, one of the most proven genetic situations that we know impacts body composition. And so if you have this FTO gene, your phenotype, what is outwardly obvious to others, your genotype being your genes, but your phenotype being what is actually a characteristic, so things like your eye color and that kind of stuff. Your phenotype is someone with body composition with a higher amount of body fat. And we know that it's highly likely because that person has a much larger appetite. Now, if you're someone who doesn't have a large appetite, but you're just eating like a muppet, and let's be honest, for a lot of people who have gained lots of body fat that they don't want, it's because they've been a muppet. And I use the word muppet because it's a little bit more kind and it's a little bit more accepting. It's not, and because I'm being specific in that they just go, yeah, I have been a muppet. You know what? I just stopped exercising when I got a job or when I got married or whatever. And I've just been eating junk and not looking after myself, and it's my fault. On the flip side, someone who's, you see these TV programs and they create so much discussion and argumentative situations with people because people are like, no, it's not your genes, it's all your fault and this, that, and the other. And obesity is not a disease when we know medically it is, and that it can be classified that way. But that doesn't remove personal responsibility completely. But putting the onus all on people and as though it's just some fair level playing field and it's all about willpower and how much of a good and moral person you are is stupid. But for some people, they have just been a bit of a muppet. They do a Joe Wicks plan. They haven't got a large appetite. They eat some wholesome food and they drop body fat. Now, they could have done any program, any stupid program like Joe's, a shake diet, anything. These people are just going to succeed when you have hundreds of thousands of people go through your program. The last I was told that the sort of failure rate, the non-completion rate of his program is 95%. So you have 500,000 people, and it's many more, I think, have bought the 149 plan. Do the maths on the profit margins. And that's a lot of people who just never completed it because it's dumb. But that's a lot of people to have some before and afters for and make it seem like it's successful. Now, the problem is, and this is how I personally choose, this is my morals, I think if you've got that much of a non-completion rate, if Emma knew, for instance, if 95% of people, or 50% of people, or 20% of people just were not bothering to finish and dropping out because it was too hard or it wasn't good or whatever, we would look at ourselves. We actually made some changes after a few intakes to, rather than doing what universities do where they just move grade boundaries, which I think is ridiculous. We adapted the course. And so in his instance, I would have liked to have seen that personally. It's his life, he can do what he wants. So yeah, in this instance, it's this one couple, literally they said we're cooking his recipes and I was splitting it between me and my partner, and that's how we lost fat. And it's like, this was for serving of one. Now if you have this high appetite and you're someone who really struggles with weight loss, it just shows you those are the people who we as an industry should be serving in many, many different ways through, the mental health support aspect of this and the getting rid of weight stigma as much as we can and raising awareness of that kind of stuff. And not immediately fighting against things like the health at every size movement. Understanding that there are dumb people in every realm. Of course, there are people who are on the side of health at every size who just talk absolute rubbish. They're going to be there. But go back to the roots of it and understand that there are so many benefits of that movement, of understanding that weight loss isn't the only way to try and be healthy, and that there are other things that people can try and do. And actually at some point, just go banging on and on and on about weight isn't necessarily the best thing. And this is essentially the crux. It's funny, I didn't mean to make this point, but the crux of this podcast is sometimes people shouldn't be focusing on fat loss. And I haven't even got to what the point of this podcast is, as usual, but it all adds to the story, right? It's not a tangent. It's all adds to the story, because if you don't have the knowledge that's in my head, how can you fully conceptualize what I'm trying to get across to you from a point of view of someone who's very academically qualified, who's very, very well read on the research, who has loads and loads of experience and has loads and loads of insights from other practitioners who I've mentored. That's what I want to get across. All of this information is in my head. That's the point of the podcast. And musing at my window, this is the 2-minute bit. Musing at my window, I thought this week or so, 10 days, I had planned to do another phase 2 aggressive fat loss phase. I obviously was really, really happy. I ended up losing about 15.5 pounds in body weight that has consistently stayed off in a relatively short period of time. I think, again, what's probably interesting for people is I lost 10 pounds in 10 days. I said, maybe around half of that was body fat. It turns out maybe I slightly underestimated that amount of body fat that I'd lost. And maybe it was a teeny bit more. It's hard to say without DEXA scans regularly or alike. And the reason I say that is then I had Christmas, and then I went away to Dubai, eating ad libitum, being a bit more active, which is, going from 2,000 steps a day to maybe 10,000 on some days. But eating ad libitum, having not given myself binge eating tendencies, I maybe actually continue to very, very slowly lose a teeny bit more body fat, because I've ended up with the whole of Christmas, the whole of New Year's, being away in Dubai and coming back, and we're now on whatever it is, the 20-something 1st of January, still having been eating completely ad libitum, sweets and chocolate whenever I felt like them, big meals, no calorie counting, no kind of routine. Back to my usual self of just eating, but, I have these prep kitchen meals, which are decent, have a decent bit of protein, loads of carbs, some fat, decent amount of vegetables, and, eating sweets and stuff with the babies and having dessert with them and buying cookies and donuts. But the point being is those 15.5 whatever pounds that I lost-ish have just stayed off. And whether or not I've kind of carved up, because when I started eating again, I expected to regain some of the carbohydrates and glycogen and gain some weight. And maybe at the same time I did do that, but I lost some body fat slowly, more subconsciously, through just roughly eating well. And this is one of the other things is lots of people say lose weight, then you'll naturally gain it back. understanding that weight gain isn't necessarily a failure. I don't know if I needed to include the word necessarily there. But not beating yourself up over it and these kind of things. But it's not also necessarily going to happen. Lots of people say, fat loss, I aggressive dieted and then I've just maintained, gone back to maintenance calories, which is nice. I feel full all the time. And I'm eating lots of nice food and enjoying being able to be very sociable with my food, etc. One of the nice things of not being constantly obsessed with food and dieting, that's one of the benefits of aggressive dieting, doing it, getting in and out quickly. So the point, again, this 2-minute point that I'm trying to make is, I wanted to do this 10 days, again, before going into a new phase of muscle gain and getting absolutely jacked. But my head hasn't been in it. And therefore I've not forced it. And I've had acceptance around that. And I've not beaten myself up over it. I had a goal and I didn't even start. And lots of people would just go, oh, I'm such a failure. Why can't I ever do this? Blah, blah, blah. Just negative self-talk. For me it was. And I feel like I'm probably going to say this. This is why it's good I go on tangents, because it's so I don't say the same thing over and over again. Because this whole point is, if it's not a thrilling, life-giving, exciting experience, don't do it. If it's an arduous task, and I don't mean it's difficult on some days, because there's a huge part of just being disciplined in different areas of your life. And that's fine when it's going to be, one day you wake up not motivated to go to the gym, do your daily steps, meal prep, everything, whatever you're doing. And there's different ways. Sometimes I find with exercise, sometimes it's just picking yourself and getting out there and doing it. But when it's a mental endeavor, sometimes actually on that day, this is why I talk about undulating your calories. On that day, you don't feel like meal prepping. You just eat ad libitum and just eat really well. Nourish yourself. But I haven't felt like doing it, so I haven't. And in that instance, some of you, let's say you've started a 12-week program with a personal trainer and you feel like, oh no, it's worth a discussion with that personal trainer. I don't feel in it for these 2 weeks. Look, I'm trying to make a positive decision here. Can I have a 2-week holiday from our training and put it on the end? Obviously, those people, their businesses and this, that, and the other. It's a discussion. I can't go into the politics and the social etiquette and the business etiquette and whatever of that situation. But the alternative is just extend it. Take that week or 2 weeks or whatever and focus on something else. Focus on nourishing yourself, eating well, training well, giving yourself life back, filling your cup up, making yourself hungry for that pursuit of fat loss. And starting when you're ready. So you could focus on all sorts of other things. People talk about focus on a performance goal. Just focus on, this is when I talk about multi-phasic strategies. Give yourself a diet break. It doesn't even have to be a diet break. It's just living. When I teach practitioners, I talk about them coaching people to live. Talk to your personal trainer, your nutritionist, your dietitian, whoever's coaching you, life coach. This is where I'm going to practice living. When I come off my aggressive diet, I go back to living. What habits have you got in place that's going to mean that living doesn't undermine whatever you've done during that grinding phase? How are you going to set your environment up? Are you going to macro track forever? I hope not. It's not a way to live. Learn what it's like. Start, if you're one of these obsessive macro trackers and you've got anxiety around not tracking, start. Take one snack or one meal that you don't weigh and track. Even if it's the same thing, You're weighing out the same bowl of oats every single day. Don't weigh it, just give it roughly. If it's plus or minus 5 or 10 or 20 grams, whatever, you can probably do it within plus or minus half a gram. You're such an anal weigher. Start to show yourself and your mind that things aren't just going to go wildly wrong if you don't control every aspect of your diet. This is a whole new topic that I should talk about. Trackers moving to non-tracking. Something I've had questions on loads of times over the years. Something I'd want to do well, because obviously people put themselves into these situations of obsessive tracking, disordered ways of eating, can't get out of it, start giving themselves horrible anxiety around food. It's not a nice situation to be in. And any coaches, practitioners, try not to let your clients ever get there. I don't feel like I did a great job on talking about group coaching, but what I was saying is there are aspects just cropped into my mind. Muscle gain and health and this, you can do these things through group coaching. When it comes to fat loss, aggressive fat loss as a group, it just doesn't work. It's not something that's going to work for everyone. You'd need to go through and screen each individual to make sure that they are actually in a headspace. Because people will go, yeah, this is great, I'm going to do it. And then they end off worse off because of how they approach it and how they're seeing it. And even again, the quiet people in the group just going along with it and not speaking up for themselves. Not even being wanting to do it, just getting swept along with it. So, no idea what this podcast is going to be called. I imagine it's something around that. I don't know. We'll see what. Someone will listen to it and time point it for you, and they will send me 3 to 5 suggested titles and I will pick one. Cool. I hope you're well. I hope you found that interesting. So much information in there. Send it to someone who needs to hear this. Let me know if you've listened. And until next time, much love.